Ambassador Wei walked through the massive doors of the council chamber. His footsteps echoed in the silence. Around him, representatives from 17 different species watched from their elevated seats. Some had scales, others had fur or feathers. A few looked almost human, but their eyes gave them away. Those eyes held something cold, something ancient. Carried no weapons. He wore a simple gray suit that Earth diplomats had worn for decades. In his hand, he held a data pad containing humanity's proposal. He had rehearsed his speech 100 times during the 3-month journey from Earth. Now, standing in the center of the galaxy's power, the words felt small and inadequate. The hierarch spoke first. His voice came through translators as a soft hiss. Human, you stand before the Galactic Council to request full membership. This is unprecedented. Your species achieved faster-than-light travel only 40 years ago. Most species wait centuries before such a request. Nodded, honored hierarch, humanity understands we are young, but in 40 years we have established 30 colony worlds. Our population stands at 11 billion across human space. We have proven ourselves capable of breeding without restraint, the hierarch interrupted. Capable of consuming resources at alarming rates, capable of expanding faster than any species we have encountered in 5,000 years of council history. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, felt sweat gathering at his collar, but he kept his voice steady. We ask only for the same rights granted to other council members, the freedom to manage our own affairs, the opportunity to trade and learn from other species, recognition of our sovereignty. A new voice boomed across the chamber. War Master of the Hegemony stood from his seat. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. The Council does not fear your population or your colonies, human. We fear what you represent. Every species that joins the Council agrees to certain limits: population controls, technological restrictions, territory boundaries. These rules maintain order. They prevent the chaos that consumed the galaxy before the Council was formed. Met the War Master's gaze, and if we agree to these terms. You won't, said simply. We have studied your history. Your species has never accepted limits willingly. You fought each other for thousands of years over resources, territory, ideology. Even now, unified under one government, you push outward with a hunger that disturbs us. If we grant you full membership within 2 centuries, you will outnumber every other species combined. Your expansion will destabilize the entire galactic order. The chamber fell silent, felt the weight of that silence pressing down on him. He had known this moment would come. Earth's government had prepared for it. But standing here, facing the collected power of 17 species that had ruled the galaxy understood how small humanity truly was. Then what do you propose? Asked. The hierarch leaned forward. Humanity will halt all colony expansion immediately. You will submit to council oversight of your population growth. You will allow council inspectors to monitor your military capabilities. You will reduce your fleet to defensive levels only, as determined by council experts. In exchange, we will grant you limited trade agreements and access to certain technologies. In time, perhaps in 500 years, humanity may be ready for full membership. His jaw tightened. 500 years. Generations of humans living under alien rule, their growth stunted, their ambitions crushed. He thought of the colony worlds already established. Families who had traveled light years to build new homes. Children born under foreign stars who knew Earth only through stories. I must consult with my government, said carefully. Of course, the hierarch replied. You have 1 standard week to provide your answer. The council will convene again to hear humanity's decision. Left the chamber knowing what Earth's answer would be. He had known before he arrived. The council's terms were designed to be rejected. They wanted an excuse for what would come next. 6 days later, delivered Earth's response. Humanity would continue managing its own affairs. They would respect other species' territory but would not halt expansion into unclaimed space. They would maintain a military appropriate to their security needs. They thanked the Council for their consideration and hoped to revisit membership discussions in the future. The Council's response came within hours. A blockade fleet began assembling at the borders of human space. 300 warships, the largest combined force in Council history. War Master took command personally. Remained at the Council station, requesting continued diplomatic discussions. The hierarch refused all communication. Through unofficial channels, learned that several Council species had argued against military action. The vote had been close, but fear had won over caution. Back on Earth, Admiral Sarah sat in the war room beneath Geneva. Holographic displays showed the Council fleet's movements. Intelligence reports streamed in from stealth drones that humanity had deployed years ago, long before formal contact with the Council. Those drones had been watching, learning, gathering data on every major Council world. "They think we're primitive," said to her assembled officers. "They see our ships and think we're using basic technology. They count our numbers and assume we'll fold at the first real fight." General Martinez, commander of ground forces, leaned forward. "Will we?" Smiled without humor. "Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting itself. We nearly destroyed our own planet 3 times. We built weapons that could crack continents and learned to live with that knowledge hanging over us every day. We unified not because we became peaceful, but because we finally found something more important to fight for than our differences. These Council species have lived in peace for centuries. They've forgotten what war really costs." "They outnumber us significantly," Admiral noted. "Their technology is superior in most categories. Ship for ship, we can't match them." "No," agreed. "But wars aren't won by superior ships. They're won by superior will. The Council is fighting to maintain order. We're fighting for our survival. That's a different kind of motivation." War Master sent his message 3 days after the blockade was in position. It was broadcast across all human frequencies. "Humanity, the Galactic Council offers you one final opportunity. Halt all expansion. Submit to Council authority. Reduce your military forces to levels we determine appropriate. You have 48 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will enforce compliance through military action. Your species will be reduced to pre-status. Your colonies will be evacuated. Earth will be quarantined. This is not negotiation. This is inevitability." Drafted her response personally. She kept it brief. "War Master, humanity requests a meeting at the border. We wish to discuss terms. Admiral Sarah of the Terran Defense Fleet will meet with you personally in 36 hours. We ask only for the opportunity to talk before any irreversible actions are taken." Agreed. He brought his flagship and an escort of 10 heavy cruisers to the meeting point. Arrived with a single destroyer, the TDF Resolute. The 2 commanders met via holographic communication. Appeared in full ceremonial armor, his 4 arms crossed in what human intelligence suggested was a posture of dominance. Wore her standard uniform, simple and unadorned except for her rank insignia. "Admiral," began, "I respect your courage in requesting this meeting, but the Council's position is final. There will be no negotiation." "I understand," replied. "Before we proceed, however, I thought you should know something. War Master, you command 300 ships. Your flagship is the Eternal Vigilance, a dreadnought-class vessel commissioned 47 years ago. Its captain is Vessel Lord Thrain, who has 3 offspring currently serving in the Council fleet. Your second-in-command is Fleet Leader, stationed aboard the carrier. His home world is Prime, 4th planet in the system, population 800 million. His expression shifted slightly, continued. "Your blockade includes ships from 17 species. We can name every captain. We know their home worlds, their families, their service records. We've been watching you for 7 years, War Master. Since the first Council scout ship entered human space. We knew this moment would come eventually. We've been preparing." She gestured and her display filled with data, ship movements, energy signatures, communications intercepts, years of intelligence gathering compressed into a single presentation. "We're not asking you to retreat because we fear you," said quietly. "We're asking because we respect life. All life, including yours. The Council can withdraw. We can negotiate humanity's integration gradually, over decades if necessary. We can find a way to coexist. Or you can press forward with your blockade and learn exactly what a species raised on total war can do when their survival is threatened." Was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You think intelligence gathering frightens me. You think knowing names and numbers will stop 300 warships. Admiral, you command at most 500 vessels, most inferior to ours. You cannot win this war." "Perhaps," acknowledged. "But how many of your 300 ships will return home? How many captains will you send to their deaths? How many of those families we know so much about will you make orphans? And when this is over, when you've spent the blood of 17 species to crush humanity, what will you have gained? An empty solar system, dead worlds." "We will have maintained order," said. "We will have prevented the chaos your species represents." "Then we have nothing more to discuss," said. "We offered peace. You chose war. History will record that humanity tried to avoid this." She terminated the connection, stared at the empty space where her image had been. Something in her eyes had disturbed him. Not fear, not even anger. It was the look of someone who had already counted the cost and accepted it. He sent the order. The blockade would advance into human space at dawn. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. The Council fleet moved forward in perfect formation, ships that had never known defeat approaching an enemy they assumed would break at the first real test. On Earth, watched the Council fleets advance on her displays. She thought of her daughter, 12 years old, safe in a bunker beneath the Atlantic Ocean. She thought of the millions of humans on 30 colony worlds, preparing for what was coming. She thought of humanity's history, written in blood and struggle and stubborn refusal to surrender. "All ships," she broadcast across the Terran Defense Fleet. "Stand ready. The Council is coming. Show them what humanity means." The first shots were fired at 8:47 Universal Standard Time. The war had begun. In council chambers across the galaxy, species that had known only peace for centuries suddenly remembered what terror felt like. They had pressed hard against humanity, certain that superior numbers and technology would carry the day. They were about to learn that some things mattered more than numbers. The war ground into its third year. On Nova Terra, the sky burned orange with fires that never seemed to die. Commander of the Assault Legion stood on a broken highway overlooking what used to be the colony's capital city. Behind him, his soldiers tended to their wounds and checked their weapons. In front of him, the city sprawled like a corpse that refused to accept death. 8 months. 8 months his forces had been fighting for this one colony world. The orbital bombardment had destroyed most of the infrastructure in the first week. Supply lines had been cut. The human population should have surrendered by now. Every tactical model, every strategic analysis, every bit of conventional military wisdom said they should have given up. Instead, they had gone underground. Watched smoke rise from a district his forces had cleared yesterday. Cleared was perhaps too strong a word. They had advanced through it, yes, taken the surface buildings, but the tunnels beneath went on forever. The humans had spent 3 years digging, preparing, turning their entire city into a maze that swallowed his soldiers and gave back only corpses. Lieutenant approached, her scales darkened with ash. "Commander, 3rd Battalion reports 40% casualties in the warehouse district. They've secured the surface but encountered heavy resistance in the underground levels. The humans are using children to run ammunition through the tunnels. They're too small for our targeting systems to track effectively." Felt something twist in his gut. Children. He had fought on 40 worlds across 5 decades of military service. He had put down rebellions, enforced Council law, maintained order across hundreds of light years. Never had he fought an enemy that armed their children. "How old?" he asked. "Intelligence estimates between 10 and 14 years old. The humans are teaching them the tunnel networks. They're more effective at supply running than adults because they can move faster through the narrow passages." Closed his eyes. Back on Prime, his own played in gardens that had never known war. They learned mathematics and art. They grew up safe, protected, innocent. The thought of putting a weapon in their hands was obscene. But these human children weren't innocent anymore. They carried ammunition with the same grim determination as their parents. Some, intelligence reported, fought directly when cornered, died directly when his soldiers had no choice but to defend themselves. "Continue the advance," ordered, his voice hollow. "But instruct all units to avoid firing on obvious children unless absolutely necessary for self-defense. I won't turn this into a massacre if it can be avoided." Saluted and left. Knew his order was probably futile. In the underground fighting, everything happened too fast. Shadows moved in tunnel darkness. Weapons fired before identification was certain. Children died alongside adults, and his soldiers carried that weight back to the surface. In the tunnels beneath the city, crawled through a passage barely wide enough for her thin shoulders. She was 11 years old and had been running ammunition for 6 months. The pack on her back held 40 rounds for the defenders 2 levels down. Her hands were from scraping against rough tunnel walls. Her clothes were filthy, patched and repatched so many times the original fabric was barely visible. She didn't think about the aliens hunting her. She thought about the route, left at the collapsed section, down through the ventilation shaft, across the old subway tunnel, up through the emergency access. If she thought about the soldiers, about their weapons that could burn through walls, about what happened to runners who got caught, she would freeze. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Reached the checkpoint and passed her pack to one of the defenders. He was 17 and looked 50. "Good run, kid," he said, ruffling her hair with a hand missing 2 fingers. "You're getting faster." "They're pushing hard in Section 7, reported, repeating what she'd heard at the last checkpoint. "The engineers say the ceiling is unstable. They're going to drop it when enough aliens are inside." Nodded, "Get some water and rest. You've got another run in 2 hours." Found a corner and sat down. Around her, the defenders prepared for the next wave. Old men cleaned weapons alongside young women. Someone had organized a classroom in one of the side tunnels, teaching children reading and math between explosions. The teacher was a former professor who had lost his legs in the bombardment. He taught from a wheelchair, surrounded by students who sometimes fell asleep mid-lesson from exhaustion. This was Nova Terra now. This was what humanity had become. Not heroes, not warriors, just people who refused to stop existing. In orbit above Nova Terra, the naval war continued its brutal rhythm. Captain commanded the TDF Hammer, a destroyer that had seen better days. Her ship was part of the third wave in what humans called the Hammer Strike Doctrine. It was a simple tactic, brutally effective, and absolutely suicidal for the first 2 waves. "Wave 1 reporting," her communications officer called. 40 ships engaging, 23 destroyed in initial contact. They're drawing fire." Watched her display. 40 small ships, mostly converted civilian vessels with weapons welded to their hulls, charged directly at the Council blockade fleet. They flew in erratic patterns, making themselves hard to hit but impossible to ignore. Council ships turned their weapons on them, tracking, firing, destroying. "Wave 2 launching," communications reported. 60 ships, they're through the outer screen, 15 down, 20, 28. Wave 2 consisted of larger vessels, actual military ships, but still outmatched by Council technology. They punched through the gap created by Wave 1, absorbing fire that would otherwise target Wave 3. They fired everything they had, causing damage where they could, creating chaos in the Council formation. Wave 3, prepare to engage, ordered. Her hands were steady on her controls. She had done this 7 times before. 3 times she had survived. The odds weren't good, but they were better than Waves 1 and 2. Wave 3, go. The Hammer and 19 other heavy destroyers accelerated through the debris field. Council ships turned to engage, but they had been focused on the first 2 waves. Their point defense systems were overwhelmed, their formation disrupted. Ship closed to weapons range. Fire everything, she commanded. The Hammer's main gun spoke. Missiles launched. Energy weapons carved through vacuum. Around her, 19 other ships did the same. The Council ships were individually superior, yes. Better shields, better weapons, better everything. But close range was the great equalizer, and humans had learned to get close no matter the cost. A Council cruiser's shields collapsed under concentrated fire. The Hammer's missiles punched through its armor. Secondary explosions bloomed across its hull. Victory, thought. 1 ship down, only 200 more to go. Then her ship shuddered as return fire caught them. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. Hull breach on Deck 3. Engines at 60%. Shield generators overheating. Get us out, ordered. Fall back to repair range. The Hammer limped away from the engagement. Behind them, 2 more Council ships burned. 5 human vessels wouldn't be going home. The mathematics of attrition played out across 100 similar engagements. Humans trading 3 or 4 ships for every Council vessel destroyed. Losses that should have broken any species' will to fight. But humanity had spent 10,000 years learning to accept losses. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Wei sat in a room that served as both diplomatic office and prison. The Council had not expelled him, but neither would they speak with him. He was a reminder of their failure, a symbol of the war that was slowly bleeding the galaxy white. Monitored the war through whatever reports he could access. Nova Terra still held. The Hammer strikes continued taking their toll on Council fleets. Earth itself remained unconquered, its defenses growing stronger every day as more resources poured into the Sol system. But the cost? Read casualty reports and felt each number like a physical wound. 3 million dead on Nova Terra. 50,000 ships lost across all fronts. Colony worlds burned. Human soldiers died by the thousands in battles across 100 star systems. And the Council was suffering too. Had intelligence networks that continued feeding him information. The economy had been completely militarized. Civilian production had ceased. Food shortages were beginning on their core worlds. The military, once considered invincible, had suffered defeat after defeat. Their soldiers came home broken, traumatized by fighting an enemy that wouldn't quit. The Commonwealth, with their advanced technology, was running low on rare materials. Their super-heavy battleships sat in dock because they couldn't manufacture replacement parts fast enough. Even the architects of the war were facing domestic unrest as casualties mounted. Sent daily messages requesting peace talks. The Council refused every time. They had committed too much to back down. Pride demanded they finish what they started. But pride was expensive, and the galaxy's credit was running out. Commander finally took the surface of Nova Terra's capital 8 months and 12 days after the siege began. His forces planted the Council flag in the central square. Around them, the city lay in ruins. His battalion had entered the campaign with 3,000 soldiers. 500 remained combat effective. The humans had retreated deeper underground. They hadn't surrendered, hadn't even asked for terms. They had simply fallen back, taking their weapons, their supplies, their wounded. The tunnels went down a kilometer in some places. Would need another year to clear them all, and his forces were spent. He sat on a piece of rubble and removed his helmet. The air smelled of smoke and death. In the distance, he could hear explosions as his soldiers tried to collapse tunnel entrances. They weren't winning this fight. They were just making the rubble bounce. His communication device chirped. Fleet Command with new orders. Read them and felt something break inside him. They were being redeployed. Nova Terra was considered secure enough. His battalion would be given 2 weeks to rest and then sent to another front. Another world. Another fight against an enemy that didn't understand defeat. Looked at the council flag flying over the ruins. Victory, they called it. He had never seen a more bitter victory in his life. Above Nova Terra, Captain and the Hammer participated in another hammer strike. This time, the Hammer was Wave 1, made her peace with that. Someone had to go first. Someone had to draw the fire so Waves 2 and 3 could get through. Her crew didn't complain. They were volunteers, everyone. They knew the odds. They flew anyway because behind them were Waves 2 and 3. Behind them was Nova Terra, still holding. Behind them was Earth, where families lived and children grew and life continued despite everything the galaxy threw at them. The Hammer accelerated toward the Council blockade. Weapons locked on. Whispered a prayer to gods she didn't really believe in. Then she gave the order to fire, and her ship became one more number in the mathematics of war. In council chambers across the galaxy, emergency sessions convened. The delegate demanded more resources. The representative reported military capabilities degraded by 40%. The counselor presented economic projections that showed collapse within 18 months if the war continued at current intensity. The hierarch listened to it all and felt the weight of his decision pressing down. He had pushed for this war. He had convinced the council that humanity represented an existential threat. Now that threat was proving more dangerous than he had imagined, not because humans were militarily superior, but because they simply refused to break. One of his advisors approached quietly. Hierarch, there are reports of unrest on several member worlds. Populations questioning the cost of the war. Some are calling for negotiation. They cannot negotiate, the hierarch said. We have gone too far. If we stop now, we look weak. Other species will question council authority. The entire galactic order could collapse. If we continue, the order may collapse anyway. We are breaking ourselves against humanity's will. The hierarch had no response to that. He watched the casualty reports scroll across his display and wondered if this was how civilizations died. Not with a bang, but with the slow realization that some fights couldn't be won no matter how much you wanted victory. The war ground on. The galaxy pressed hard against humanity, trying to crush their will, to break their spirit, to force them back into the box where young species belonged. And humanity bled and died and fought and held. The Council fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 800 warships, the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. Every species had contributed their last reserves. Every captain knew this was the final push. If Earth fell, humanity would collapse. The war would end. War Master stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance and watched his displays fill with contact markers. The human home system was a fortress. Orbital platforms around every planet. Minefields seeded throughout the asteroid belt, defense stations that bristled with weapons, and ships, hundreds of human ships, pulling back toward Earth like a clenched fist. Fleet status ordered. All vessels accounted for, his tactical officer reported. 817 ships, fleet at full combat readiness. Long-range scans detect approximately 400 human capital ships and thousands of smaller craft. Defensive positions concentrated around Earth and interplanetary orbits. Nodded, the numbers favored the Council. 2-to-1 advantage in capital ships, superior technology, better trained crews. This should be decisive. So why did something in his gut feel wrong? Begin the advance. Battle Plan Omega. All ships maintain formation. We hit them with overwhelming force across a broad front. No feints, no tricks, just pure military superiority. The Council fleet moved inward, past Neptune's orbit, past Uranus. The human fleet watched them come and did nothing. No advanced screens, no probing attacks, just waiting. On Earth, Supreme Commander Sarah stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva. 3 years of war had aged her visibly. Gray streaked her hair. Lines creased her face. But her eyes held the same fierce determination they had the day the war began. Council fleet is passing Uranus, her tactical officer reported. They're maintaining tight formation. Speed suggests they'll reach Earth orbit in 36 hours. Any signs they've detected the reserve forces? Asked. Negative. The asteroid field signatures are masking their presence. As far as Council sensors can tell, everything they see is everything we have. Smiled grimly. Deception in war was as old as war itself. The Council thought they faced 400 ships. They were correct, technically. Those 400 ships were all they could see. What they couldn't see were the 300 vessels had hidden in the outer system over the past 6 months. Ships that had limped in damaged from other fronts, supposedly heading to shipyards for repairs. Ships that had been quietly refit and concealed, waiting for this moment. Patience said, let them commit. Let them come close enough that they can't escape. Around Earth, billions of people waited in underground shelters. Some had been there for weeks. Children who had never seen sunlight played in artificial light. Parents tried to maintain normalcy in rooms carved from rock. Teachers taught classes. Doctors treated patients. Life continued in the deep places because that was what humanity did. They adapted. They endured. 12-year-old Maya sat with her school group in a shelter beneath the Atlantic Ocean. She was the Supreme Commander's daughter, though few knew that. Her mother kept it secret, didn't want Maya to be treated differently. Now Maya listened to her teacher explain mathematical principles while explosions echoed distantly through the rock above. "Will we die?" one of the younger children asked. The teacher, an old man who had fought in the early days of the war, smiled gently. "Maybe, maybe not. But your parents are up there fighting, so we have the chance to live. Best thing we can do is keep learning, keep growing, keep being worth what they're sacrificing for us." Maya thought about her mother, somewhere in a command center, making decisions that would determine whether humanity survived. She wished she could talk to her, tell her she loved her, tell her it was okay to be scared. But communications were restricted. The shelter was deep and isolated for a reason. So Maya did the only thing she could. She studied her math, learned her lessons, trusted that the adults would find a way. The battle began at Jupiter. Council forces pushed through the defense network there with brutal efficiency. Orbital stations fell. Human ships fought and died. The giant planet's orbit became a graveyard of burning metal and frozen corpses. Captain, somehow still alive after 3 years of hammer strikes, commanded a patched-together cruiser at the Jupiter engagement. Her ship had been rebuilt 3 times. Her crew were veterans who had survived a dozen battles. They fought with the grim efficiency of people who had done this too many times to count. "Concentrate fire on the damaged cruiser," ordered. "If we can take it out before their support arrives, we buy the rest of the fleet 30 more minutes." Her weapons officer targeted and fired. The Council cruiser's shields collapsed. Human missiles finished it off. Victory. 1 ship down. 816 to go. Then Council reinforcements arrived and had to order the retreat. Her fleet fell back towards Saturn, trading ships for time, making the Council pay for every kilometer of space they claimed. On Mars, defense batteries opened fire as the Council fleet came into range. The red planet had been fortified for 3 years. Weapons platforms covered the surface. Millions of soldiers manned underground bunkers, ready to fight if the Council tried to land. The governor of Mars, a former mining engineer named, watched the battle from a command center inside Olympus Mons. "We're not winning," his military advisor said quietly. "No," agreed, "but we're making them bleed for it. Every hour we hold is another hour for Earth to prepare. Every ship we take down is one less attacking our families." The battle for Mars lasted 8 hours. The defense network inflicted heavy casualties, taking down 30 Council ships before orbital superiority was lost, ordered a fighting withdrawal, pulling his forces deeper underground. The Council could have the surface. They would fight for the planet beneath, make it cost so much that even victory would feel like defeat. War Master watched Mars fall and felt no satisfaction. His fleet had been reduced by 40 ships. 40 ships to take one planet, and Earth still waited ahead. His logistics officers reported concerning supply levels. His crews were exhausted. The advance had taken more time than projected, and time was a resource he was running out of. "Status of the human fleet?" he asked. "Falling back to Earth orbit. They're concentrating all remaining forces around their home world. Estimated 300 capital ships still operational." 300 had lost 100 ships and still held numerical superiority, but those numbers felt hollow now. Every engagement proved the same thing. Humans didn't fight to win, they fought to make you lose. Every victory cost more than it should. "Continue the advance," ordered. "All ships prepare for final assault. This ends at Earth." The Council fleet reached Earth orbit 28 hours after entering the Sol system. They found the human defense fleet arrayed in a spherical formation around the planet. Orbital platforms, defense stations, thousands of smaller craft, all concentrated in one desperate last stand. Positioned his forces and prepared to give the order to attack. This was the moment. Break the human fleet, bombard their command centers, and the war was over. Then his sensors officer spoke. "War Master, we're detecting ships emerging from the asteroid belt. Multiple contacts. They're not on approach vectors, they're behind us." His blood went cold. He pulled up the tactical display and watched 300 fresh human ships appear from hiding spots throughout the outer system. Ships that had been concealed. Ships that Council intelligence had never accounted for. Ships that were now moving to cut off his fleet's escape route. "Trap," he whispered. "It's a trap." Watched her displays as the reserve forces revealed themselves. "Now," she said quietly, "give the order. Every ship, every station, every gun, everything we have. Hit them now while they're confused." The space around Earth erupted. The human defense fleet charged forward. Orbital platforms fired in synchronized volleys. Defense stations launched everything in their magazines. And from behind, the reserve forces closed like a vice. The Council fleet found itself surrounded, tried to organize a fighting withdrawal, but the human attack was too coordinated. Ships that had been retreating for 3 years suddenly fought with renewed fury. They had been trading space for time, losing battles to win the war. Now, in their home system, with everything they loved behind them, they stopped retreating. Captain's ship dove through Council formations. Her weapons never stopped firing. Around her, human ships did the same. The hammer strike doctrine wasn't needed here. This was a knife fight, close and brutal, where individual skill mattered less than pure determination. Ship took hit after hit. Shields failed. Armor breached. But she kept fighting because stopping meant dying, and dying meant her world fell, and she had a nephew down there in the shelters who liked to draw pictures of spaceships. Simultaneously, on every front across the galaxy, human forces that had been conducting fighting withdrawals for months suddenly turned and attacked. Fleets that had been conserving strength launched coordinated offensives. The timing was perfect, planned months in advance. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't broken. They had been waiting for this moment. On Nova Terra, the underground defenders emerged from their tunnels. Commander's occupation forces, already stretched thin, found themselves facing an enemy that had been hiding beneath their feet. The humans attacked supply depots, communication centers, anything that kept the Council forces operational. Received reports of uprisings across the planet and knew he was beaten. His forces couldn't hold against a population that had spent a year preparing for this moment. He ordered a withdrawal to orbital drop sites, but half his battalions never made it. They were cut off, surrounded, forced to surrender or die. War Master's fleet disintegrated over Earth, not because human ships were superior. They weren't. Not because human tactics were brilliant. They were desperate. But because the Council fleet was too far from support, too exhausted from the advance, and facing an enemy that had everything to lose. His flagship took critical damage. Main engines failed. Life support wavered. Around him, his fleet scattered. Some ships tried to break through the human blockade. Others fought where they were, dying in place. The perfect formation had become chaos. War Master, his communication officer said, Admiral is hailing us. Almost refused. Pride demanded he die rather than admit defeat. But pride was what had gotten them into this disaster. Maybe intelligence could get them out. Put her through, he said. His face appeared on his screen. She looked as exhausted as he felt. War Master, your fleet is broken. Your supply lines are cut. You're surrounded and outnumbered. I'm offering you a choice. Order your forces to stand down and we negotiate terms, or continue fighting and make your species' history remember this as the day you threw away 800 ships for nothing. You haven't won, said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, agreed. But neither have you, and that's been our strategy from the beginning. We can't beat the Galactic Council in a fair fight, but we can make the fight so unfair that winning costs more than you can afford to pay. How many more ships are you willing to lose? How many more captains will you send home in boxes? How many species will rebel against the Council when they realize you bled them white trying to stop us? Looked at his displays. Half his fleet was gone. The other half was trapped. Back across the galaxy, human offensives were reclaiming lost territory. On the Council station, Ambassador was probably composing messages about humanity's magnanimous peace terms. The whole situation was intolerable. It was also reality. What are your terms? Asked. 3 months later, delegates gathered aboard the Indomitable's flagship. The treaty signing was broadcast across the galaxy. The Council recognized human sovereignty across all claimed territories. Humanity gained Provisional Council membership with a path to full status within 50 years. Technology sharing agreements would be established gradually. Most importantly, the Council acknowledged humanity's right to manage their own expansion and population policies. Ambassador Wei stood before the assembled delegates. His left arm was in a sling, wounded during the Nova Terra siege where he had volunteered to help defend the underground shelters. Scars marked his face. He had earned them, people said, by being there when the bombs fell instead of hiding in a safe diplomatic bunker. This treaty does not represent victory, said carefully. Victory would mean we won. We didn't win. We survived. There's a difference. Millions of humans died in this war, millions more on Council worlds. We have colonies that are rubble. You have economies shattered by military spending. Nobody won this war. We just both finally realized that losing would hurt even more. He paused, looking at the Council delegates who had fought so hard to contain humanity. Humanity wants peace. We wanted it 3 years ago. We want it now. But we will never accept peace at the cost of our freedom. We will never submit to limits imposed by others. We will expand. We will grow. We will take our place among the stars because that is what we are. The question isn't whether you can stop us. The question is whether you want to spend the next 1,000 years trying. War Master, present as the Council's military representative, stood to respond. His armor was polished, but everyone could see the weight he carried. The weight of 100 battles fought. The weight of captains lost. The weight of a war he had been so certain he would win. Ambassador speaks truth, said. The Council underestimated humanity. We saw your numbers and your expansion and feared what you might become. We didn't understand that you already were what we feared, a species that refuses to break. That fights not because they enjoy war, but because they love what they're fighting for even more. He looked directly at who stood at attention nearby. We pressed hard against humanity. We threw the full weight of galactic military power at them. We bombed their worlds, killed their people, tried to break their will, and they held. They held because breaking simply isn't in their nature. Turn to address the full gathering. The Council must remember this. Humanity is our partner now, our ally, our equal. But the lesson of this war is clear. Never make them our enemy again. Because while we might win battles through superior technology and numbers, humans win wars through something we had forgotten: pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The treaty was signed. Handshakes were exchanged. Diplomats smiled for cameras. But everyone present knew the truth. The galaxy had changed. An ancient order had tried to enforce the rules on a young, aggressive species and had nearly broken itself in the attempt. On Earth, Maya emerged from her shelter into sunlight for the first time in 3 months. Around her, millions of other children did the same. They looked up at a sky that was theirs again, at a world they had fought to keep. Teachers organized them into groups, started leading them back to schools that would need to be rebuilt. Maya's mother found her in the crowd. Supreme Commander, still in uniform, picked up her daughter and held her close. "It's over," she whispered. "We held." "I knew you would," Maya said simply. Across human space, similar scenes played out. On Nova Terra, children climbed out of tunnels and saw sunlight. On Mars, families emerged from bunkers beneath Olympus Mons. On 30 colony worlds, people began the work of rebuilding what the war had destroyed. The casualty lists were published: 3.5 million military dead, 4 million civilian casualties, hundreds of colony settlements destroyed. The cost was staggering, almost too much to bear. But they had held. Historians would debate the war for centuries. They would argue about tactics and strategy, about who made which mistakes, about whether the conflict could have been avoided. Those debates missed the point. The galaxy had pressed hard against humanity, trying to force them into submission, trying to make them accept limits, trying to break their will to expand and grow and take their place among the stars. Humanity had held, not because they were stronger, not because they were smarter, but because when everything they loved was threatened, when their very survival was on the line, they simply refused to break. That refusal, more than any weapon or tactic, had won the war. And the galaxy would never forget it.